Obi Wan Kenobi was such a bizarre show for me, as for a while it seemed the Star Wars prequel era, at least in live action, was dead and gone, for better or for worse. Of course, we had hundreds of comic books, numerous novels, games, and the Clone Wars TV series keeping it alive, but it seemed Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen had both left Star Wars in the past. For a while, they even kind of left the fandom to an extent. All of a sudden, though, upon Disney's purchase of Star Wars, it seemed these actors had potential to return in some capacity, but honestly, it felt surreal when we finally started seeing material featuring the duo in live action. Upon seeing the show, I was really hoping to love this, especially since we got to see Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen finally get some better material that could showcase a better sense of their acting chops. It's not really a secret on this channel that while I love Star Wars, I don't think the prequels had flawless execution.
I have seen a security hologram of him killing younglings.
Not Anakin.
And seeing these two return to the universe for some new material was a fascinating prospect to see what they could really do under a director who's better at directing actors. Anyhow, as Disney's Star Wars era came to fruition and spin-off films were announced to be happening to expand the saga beyond the core film series, an overwhelming favorite for a spin-off was the character of Obi Wan, with Ewan McGregor expressing some interest in creating such a story if one was to arise. Eventually, he would talk with Disney, and they would shop around the idea of doing a movie, going so far as to court Stephen Daldry to direct this potential film, with Hossein Amani set to write, both of whom were eventually pulled onto the show in a capacity after the film was retooled. The film was to be called Obi Wan: A Star Wars Story, following the naming convention set up with Solo: A Star Wars Story and Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. The film was set to follow Obi-Wan fighting off gangs of Tusken Raiders who are attacking the Lars homestead, sort of a middle ground between what we got and the Obi-Wan John Jackson Miller novel we just talked about in my last video. Check out my other Star Wars playlist for that video, as well as many other Star Wars videos, but following the failure financially of Solo: A Star Wars Story, a film that faltered for many reasons, including a poor showing in China and oversaturation of the market, and that caused Disney to panic to the point that they put all future Star Wars films on ice and eventually fully canceled it all. A couple of them would eventually be retooled following the success of The Mandalorian, including this and the Boba Fett spin-off show. So after a bit on the shelf in mid-2019, Ewan McGregor signed back on, now for a TV show adaptation for Disney+. Hossein Amani had already retooled the movie into a full 6-episode series by the time the show was announced, and it was set to be filmed in 2020 with Deborah Chow directing the majority of the project, after impressing Kathleen Kennedy with her work on The Mandalorian. Stephen Daldry would stay on as a consulting producer, but this was kind of a consultation prize and a way to kind of use some of his ideas that he brought to the table back when he was in charge of the film version. In 2020, Kathleen Kennedy put the show on hold for a bit for some retooling, as when she saw the show started filming, she thought the hands-on protecting of Luke Skywalker felt too much like The Mandalorian protecting Baby Yoda in The Mandalorian, despite that show being largely written after the Obi-Wan script, but that's how Hollywood goes. It was temporarily paused for rewrites. Joby Harold was brought on as the new writer for the show, so it could get back on track and cut the derivative and spiritual shit in favor of sick fight scenes. Joby Harold, known for that half-assed Transformers sequel, The Rise of Beasts, which we reviewed at one point. Of course, this was early 2020, and soon COVID-19 came up and threw the whole thing behind. Though finally in 2021, the show was shot with much of the original iteration left on the cutting room floor, though some aspects remained, primarily in the first 3 episodes and the finale. The hack that is Joby Harold added new aspects like Baby Leia and took inspiration from Joker and Logan. I don't understand what he took from Joker, but that's what they claim. Chow and Harold also decided to add the Inquisitors to add action and Darth Vader because they didn't think it was humanly possible to make an Obi-Wan show without him, despite supposedly taking inspiration from the John Jackson Miller novel, which mentioned Darth Vader like twice. They also really wanted to add Darth Maul, and it was somehow Dave fucking Filoni of all people who told them that that was too much. You heard that right. Dave Filoni said adding Darth Maul was too much. Now look, I usually don't try to put my opinion into the background that much, but I think it's important to say this context since it helps explain a lot of the problems with the story. As you can see, these strange decisions behind the scenes that killed the character-led story that was at one point the plan in favor of... Alright, whatever, let's get into it. Obi Wan Kenobi takes place in 9 BBY, 10 years following Revenge of the Sith, and 9 preceding the original Star Wars film. Right in the heart of the Dark Times era, Obi-Wan is living a quaint life on Tatooine, now going by the name Ben Kenobi and keeping a watchful eye over a young Luke Skywalker from a distance. As his Force connection grows weaker and he's a bit unsure what to do with it going away, things start to heat up when another Jedi survivor of Order 66, Nari, winds up on Tatooine, bringing with him an Inquisitor hunting party led by the Grand Inquisitor.
Save his family.
The third sister, Reva, who is looking to impress, wants to find Obi-Wan, who, following his exploits in the Clone Wars, is a living legend. She believes him alive, while everyone else is kind of skeptical of that. In an attempt to lure Obi-Wan into a trap following the death of Nari, she plans to have bounty hunters kidnap baby Princess Leia, who, unbeknownst to her, is the daughter of Darth Vader. How she knew this would work and would bring Obi-Wan out of hiding is kind of beyond comprehension. I guess she knew that he knew Bail Organa, but so did presumably hundreds or thousands of other Jedi, since he was a big ally to the Jedi in the Senate, but whatever. This show was written for dumb people, so just don't think about it too much. Obi-Wan tracks Leia to Dayu, where he meets a fake mystic Jedi, Haja, who manages to get him Leia's location. The Grand Inquisitor catches wind, and Reva puts a contract out on Obi-Wan to try to kill him, but this leads to some conflict, with Reva seemingly killing the man. Then when Obi-Wan shows up, Reva reveals that Darth Vader is alive, something he hadn't heard due to his seclusion on Tatooine somehow. Anyway, Obi-Wan and baby Leia scurry off. Later on Mustafar, Reva is offered the role of Grand Inquisitor by Darth Vader if she can bring him Obi-Wan, as Obi-Wan and Leia land on Mapusa to hide out and look for safe passage through a contact provided to them by Haja, eventually meeting Tala, a woman who is said to be the leader within this covert operation. Reva succeeds in finding Obi-Wan as Vader shows up on Mapusa with Reva. Obi-Wan, who still lacks solid connection to the Force, being toyed with by his former student.
Your pain has just begun.
Though he's eventually saved by a diversion set up by Tala, but in the confusion, Reva captures baby Leia. Baby Leia is brought to the Fortress Inquisitorius and interrogated by Reva, though Obi-Wan and Tala surmise this and head out for a rescue, infiltrating the base and saving baby Leia. Though Reva is spared by Darth Vader, despite her failure, because she had the foresight to place a tracker on Leia's droid. Anyways, Obi-Wan and Tala head back to the past base on Jabim, and soon the Empire arrives, led by Reva as the Grand Inquisitor. Eventually the base is breached as the group scrambles for a quick escape, Tala losing her life, buying the gang time, and the group escaping, angering Vader, who showed up to observe. Reva decides she's going to kill Vader for his involvement in Order 66 and making the Inquisitors in the blood of the former Jedi, though she was easily bested, with the original Grand Inquisitor showing up to take back his status perfectly fine. I guess they just threw him back to off screen and no one heard but Darth Vader so that they could do this fucking Punked style setup. Anybody watch Punked?
I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna get punked.
Anyhow, Reva conveniently finds a holodisc where Bail Organa is openly talking about Luke and Leia. Reva putting two and two together and heading to Luke as Obi-Wan decides it's time to confront Vader on a moon near Jabim. Owen Lars defends his homestead from Reva after she arrives as Obi-Wan duels Darth Vader, eventually beating him and sparing him, so overtaken with sadness that his friend is dead and in his place is an evil genocidal supervillain that he just, I guess, decides to leave without killing him or attempting any sort of incapacitation. Doesn't chop his arms off, some things that might hinder his evil ways a little bit. None of that happens.
Bye.
Regardless, Reva quickly beats the Lars and chases Luke into the desert to murder him, but ultimately realizes that if she killed Luke, she would be doing the same thing Anakin did to her and her friends at the Jedi Temple, so she spares him. Obi-Wan shows up and is proud of her for abandoning the dark side. Back on Mustafar, Palpatine tells Anakin to forget about Obi-Wan since it really isn't all that important, and frankly it's a little embarrassing he even tried bothering.
Perhaps your feelings for your old master have left you weakened.
Get over it, bro. Leia goes home and is happy, and Obi-Wan heads back to the Lars homestead, allowed to briefly meet Luke and agreeing to continue to keep his distance and let Luke have a normal upbringing. All these events put Obi-Wan back in touch with the Force, allowing him to communicate with his old master Qui-Gon Jinn from the other side of the Force. Obi-Wan is our lead character, and he tries so hard to protect Luke, keep his head down, and mind his own business that he loses his connection to the Force. This show's main conflict internally for Obi-Wan is that he is kind of finding peace within himself. He lost friends, his Padawan has fallen to the dark side, and the lack of closure he has on this boring, lonely planet where he has to work every day to keep himself from being who he truly is. The plot of the show finally kind of pulling that person back out of him and positioning him in a place where he can become the wise, if odd, sage we see in the original film. This is a great arc conceptually, but as I've expressed, the means to tell this story to me is just a vessel to get us between lightsaber fights, basically, especially when contrasted with the John Jackson Miller novel, which in my opinion was probably justified in assuming Obi-Wan found little conflicts to help in around Tatooine rather than, fighting one of the reigning Sith Lords and several of his Inquisitor goons. It tries to cleanly bring Obi-Wan back into the main storyline, but still remove him by the end of the show far enough to make you buy that this could reasonably fit between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. Darth Vader didn't even go off the record to try to investigate Obi-Wan more, who he knows is alive. It's really convoluted, but technically it fits. I absolutely would not have taken the story in the directions they did to justify Obi-Wan's arc, but that's what they chose to do. Nothing is really left on the table here. Baby Leia, Darth Vader, baby Luke, it's all here. I do think it was fun getting some new material with Ewan McGregor, who's a great actor, and I think this is pretty much inarguably his best acting in the Obi-Wan role.
Why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you save us? I don't need your help.
Also on that note, seeing Ewan McGregor interact with Hayden Christensen again in the corny flashback scene blew my mind. It's 100% the recent Disney play of paying an actor a tremendous amount of money to come back in a cameo that seemed impossible. I mean, this show came out 6 months after Spider-Man No Way Home, where we saw Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield back as Spider-Man, and it wouldn't be the last example of this play, Hugh Jackman in Deadpool 3 as Wolverine. It's kind of a thing now. Here I do appreciate that it is semi-story relevant, even if it's a hair unnecessary. The digital de-aging in this flashback scene with Anakin, though, is a little jank, as digital de-aging usually is, but hey. As long as they aren't CGIing a dead person back to life like Tarkin in Rogue One, I can kind of give it a pass. I don't really care if some effects look slightly shoddy. Darth Vader comes back in this show, and this is the worst decision in the show for me. Obi-Wan and Darth Vader fought on Mustafar, and Obi-Wan won the day, and made the mistake of sparing Anakin, assuming he would slowly burn to death. That is the end of the original relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan in my eyes, and in A New Hope, it's is kind of a deadly reunion. A rematch Vader hungered for. He's ready to kill his master in revenge, and Obi-Wan is at peace and ready to join the Force. I just find it awkward to have another 2 fights in between these 2 key events in the Obi-Wan and Anakin shared history, one of which being a real dramatic duel with the 2 at full strength, and Obi-Wan kicks the shit out of the scariest villain in all of Star Wars' ass and spares him for literally no reason for a second time.
Fooled me once. Shame on you. It fooled me, we can't get fooled again.
Now, I have heard every cope in the book on why he doesn't kill Vader in this show. It's not the Jedi way, which would be fine if Obi-Wan killed literally no one, but this isn't the case. Obi-Wan killed plenty. In this very show, in fact, he kills a bunch of stormtroopers. Another being that he couldn't bring himself to kill Anakin, but this battle made him realize that Anakin was dead, and in his place was the super genocider, Darth Vader, the most ruthless and powerful killer in the galaxy. So I don't think that excuse really works anymore either. Obi-Wan had no means to incarcerate him. Leaving him alive jeopardized literally millions of lives. I suppose it could have been like a path to the dark side or something, but I don't buy it. Why didn't he just cut his arms and legs off and make him a little nugget? I don't know. He literally does nothing. He just walks off. Hurts Darth Vader's ego. I guess it was a cool mic drop moment, but Darth Vader just goes on to kill thousands of more people. Anyway, Darth Vader is again saved and put back and to explain away why the next 10 years Vader just left him alone, they had a little scene of Palpatine saying, "Don't look for Obi-Wan." I thought Palpatine would want Obi-Wan dead. I mean, he killed Grievous, he defeated Maul, he's a decorated war hero. Why not just kill him? Perhaps you could say he is so far below the Empire it means nothing to Palpatine. But then why does Palpatine sanction the army of Inquisitors and give them a super sick base and have them answer directly to Darth Vader, his subordinate? Just giving Darth Vader his own private militia of Dark Force users? That doesn't seem very smart. Isn't the rule of 2 a thing to make sure that the dark side isn't diluted, so there isn't infighting? If Palpatine was going to keep these guys around, the least he could do is finish off Obi-Wan, one of the most notable Jedi of the Clone Wars era, and actually a semi-tangible threat, theoretically. Anyhow, as for Darth Vader, he is out to kill Obi-Wan as revenge for what happened on Mustafar. He eventually is beaten by Obi-Wan and we see him overcome with hate. This is where Obi-Wan forms the opinion that Anakin can't be saved and that Darth Vader is all that remains, which is kind of sort of the workaround for Obi-Wan claiming Luke's father was dead in the same breath as he bitches about Darth Vader in A New Hope.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
A certain point of view?
The scene where Vader's mask is broken is really cool. It's a really sick moment. So sick, in fact, that part of me feels this show was almost a vessel for this broken mask moment and the fight scenes. In fact, much of this show feels like it was designed to be watched in 2-minute clips on TikTok, and honestly, the amount of AMVs I have seen about Anakin and Obi-Wan with audio from this show over it is almost incalculable. Baby Leia is so funny to me since Kathleen Kennedy scrapped the first, more quaint version of the show since Obi-Wan interacts with a young Luke Skywalker in that script, which she said was too much like Baby Yoda. However, for seemingly no reason at all, they added a young Princess Leia to this show. The thing is, the young actress isn't great enough to be our second lead. No offense, she's a child, I'm not hating on her, but it's really hard to get a child into a lead dramatic role, and for a lot of the show she's the only other person. The scene where Leia is chased by bounty hunters is unironically the most ridiculous looking thing I've ever seen. I've never been able to sit through this without laughing nearly hysterically. It might actually be one of the stupidest looking moments in all of Star Wars. Also, I don't see why they really needed Baby Leia. There were literally trillions of people in Star Wars, and they needed to pull baby Leia into the show. Like, Luke and Vader weren't enough. Anyhow, Obi-Wan sees a lot of Padme and Leia, which I think is cool connective tissue between the prequels and the original trilogy, and also explains in part why Obi-Wan feels so indebted to Leia, even beyond her Bail Organa connections. Also, Reva's ass-pull reasoning that Obi-Wan knew Bail Organa, thus he would come, even though he wasn't known to be alive, and like, what if Bail didn't have his contact information and Obi-Wan just never knew? What if another Jedi showed up? What if no Jedi showed up? Was she just eventually going to drop her off? Was she going to do something that YouTube wouldn't let me say? This show's way too sloppy. Like, what was plan B if this incredibly unlikely plan didn't work? I just don't understand. Reva is the most evil, double-crossing Inquisitor that wants to kill Obi-Wan to prove herself, ambitiously attempting to kill the Grand Inquisitor and deliver Obi-Wan to Vader. This seemed like a good enough villain origin. Add some animosity towards Vader, since she knows he's Anakin and slaughtered many of her friends during Order 66. That seems like a pretty good idea. Eventually, she betrays Darth Vader and fails, getting beat down, then running after Luke Skywalker with the hopes to get revenge and blood, though ultimately turning her back on the dark side and sparing Luke.
Have I become him?
No. You've chosen not to.
I like Reva's arc, but I think she goes from purebred dark side user, betraying and hunting for power ambitiously before turning to the light side incredibly quickly. Like, it just happens pretty much immediately. I guess she realizes killing kids is bad, so she gives up on the dark side and just becomes a good guy. I think the show could have made a slightly cleaner and extended path to the light side, but I can't hate too much. Reva's fine. I just think maybe if we saw her Order 66 roots earlier in the show, you could have some sympathy for her so it doesn't just feel like something they're introducing in the third act of the show to kind of make her a good guy by the end. I feel like she could have been genuinely great if the show was about her hunting Kenobi and finding her way back to the light side without Darth Vader's involvement. Perhaps she learns of Obi Wan and chases him around the galaxy. She tells no one since she wants the glory and potentially the title of Grand Inquisitor for bringing Darth Vader Obi Wan. Though eventually Obi Wan finds her and turns her to the light side the way Luke would turn Vader to the light side. I don't know, just spitballing. I think Vader's involvement kind of threw a wrench into her arc, and there was still some potential hidden in there that they missed out on in favor of shoehorning Darth Vader into this show. The Grand Inquisitor, the fourth sister, and the fifth brother also show up as lightsaber fodder, though honestly they don't do much beyond the Grand Inquisitor, who is betrayed by Reva, then fakes his death in a moment that served virtually no purpose for anyone but the audience. I don't really know why they bothered to fake kill him. Like, Reva thought he was dead, but like, why did he decide to just continue the charade? Why did Darth Vader start messing with her and being like, you're gonna be the Grand Inquisitor, just bring me Obi-Wan? Did Darth Vader expect that maybe she was a traitor and the only way to prove it was to have her capture Obi-Wan? But you'd think the Grand Inquisitor could just tell him what was going on and that he was a traitor? I don't understand. He just kind of shows up. It's so stupid. Honestly, I don't really care for the Inquisitors much. I think fitting them into the lore barely works, and honestly, their helicopter lightsabers look so fucking ridiculous. I just think they're so dumb. Imagine in A New Hope if somebody just started helicoptering around on a lightsaber. If you think that visual works, then perhaps I'm wrong. Tonally, the show is depressing, which I think works. Then occasionally it's kind of meant to be cute and fun with characters like Baby Leia, and I think the acting is mostly pretty well done and that helps sell it. Like, Ewan McGregor is just so good. Lots of acting with his movements and gestures, his eyes. I think it's impressive, especially when he's kind of alone in the first episode. It does get pretty intense with the saber fights. I think when Obi-Wan lacked powers and he was getting stalked by Vader on Mapuza, the show was super intense despite the fact that we pretty well knew where the show would go. You can't exactly kill Obi-Wan. The final fight feels intense and it's really cool. Like, honestly, the lightsaber fights in this show are amazingly choreographed and look really cool, but it's in service of a really dumb story. Also, there's a vibe of like Obi Wan kind of getting his mojo back a la Austin Powers.
Mojo, baby, yeah!
Natalie Holt composed this show with motifs taken from John Williams and his older Star Wars scores. It very much aims to emulate the style of the old John Williams scores, which makes sense since, like the show or not, it's hard not to consider it Star Wars Episode 3.5 in many ways. I like the soundtrack, and I think emulating the old sound here works when compared to other shows in the franchise, where I can appreciate them trying new things like The Mandalorian and its similar but different soundscape. Nicholas Detoth, Kelly Dixon, and Josh Earl edited this show, again to feel like the old Star Wars films in an editing sense, and they do a good job. I think the editing is especially potent in the impressive fight scenes, even if I think from a plot standpoint those fights are a little indulgent. Chung Hoon does the cinematography, and it's honestly amazing. The more standard moments in the show feel like the main films, perhaps more like the original trilogy than the prequels. I also dig the costumes, seeing clone troopers in practical costumes, for example, in the flashbacks instead of the CGI troopers of the prequel films, I found really cool. It is bright from a cinematography standpoint, largely, which works for the planets they picked, and I like the new environments. It's also hard not to love the final battle's cinematography that plays heavily with the red and blue lights from Obi Wan and Vader's lightsabers, kind of similar to the technique they used in the final battle from The Force Awakens. We get some live-action Alderaan scenes, which is cool since it was such an essential planet that got no love in live-action previously and is super lore essential. One costume quirk that annoys me is that Obi-Wan, even when undercover, always just runs around in Jedi robes or some approximation of them. Like, bro, there are other things to wear that would be far more discreet for an undercover Jedi, but it also feels a bit lazy. I like that characters like Cal Kestis in the Jedi Fallen Order series just wears like jumpsuits and ponchos, for example. It's more discreet and makes sense since traditional Jedi attire would stand out like a sore thumb. Baby Leia uses what basically amounts to her Endor costume for some of the show. She also sports numerous adult Leia hairstyles to remind us that this character is indeed Princess Leia. On that note, Obi-Wan tells Leia to never mention the events of the show again since it's a little sketchy how that would work, since she said, Kenobi fought with my father during the Clone Wars.
Years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars. Now he begs you to help him in his struggle against the Empire.
As if they didn't fight directly next to each other. It's a little messy on that end. Honestly, Obi-Wan is a mess. It has loads of cool stuff, great music, cinematography, a refined performance by Ewan McGregor, and I love seeing Benny Safdie as a Jedi, since he's one of my favorite modern directors, and he isn't bad as an actor either. But Baby Leia was pretty much pointless and an awful idea. Darth Vader could have been skipped in favor of expanding Reva. Owen Lars has some good moments showing his kind of bridge from an optimistic farmer to an angry old man, which was kind of cool. I like that he refuses to sell Obi-Wan out, despite seeing him as trouble, when Reva's kind of hunting for him in Mos Vespa. This scene of Reva doing parkour was really funny, especially coming so soon after Leia's hilarious escape from the bounty hunters. Like, I don't know what they were thinking here. Also, after this show, can we just all admit that Obi-Wan was probably the most powerful Jedi of the era? Like, he smokes Prime Vader and just walks it off. He beat more Sith Lords than any character, tied only with Anakin, the fucking chosen one himself. Luke being in awe of lightsabers and the Force in A New Hope is funny since Reva chased him like Jason Voorhees in this show with a lightsaber. I feel the show ultimately decided to take the route of fan service and Easter eggs over a satisfying narrative, which is the core issue. This show is amazing when you cut it into 60-second TikToks and neglect to consider the wider issue the plot puts upon the wider narrative of Star Wars. The show is loaded with cool isolated moments, epic cinematography, and Ewan McGregor is amazing, definitely at his best as Obi Wan, but the show is actually bad for the most part, mostly because the plot is just so stupid. I neglected to even mention a drunk and worse for the wear Liam Neeson showing up as Qui-Gon, proving not only do Force Ghosts age, but they don't always age so gracefully.
Beginning to think you'd never come.
I was always here, Obi Wan. You just were not ready to see.
In the end, Obi-Wan Kenobi is a show packed with cheap gimmicks that stumbles at every turn, despite really strong showings from pretty much every other department but the writer's room. Despite cast interest, Obi-Wan never got a season 2, not yet at least, though I'm fine with that personally. I can tolerate and even enjoy fan service to some extent, so I would love to see Ewan McGregor cross over as Obi-Wan in some kind of show that could make that happen. Perhaps a Tatooine show set between episode 3 and 4, following bounty hunters in the huts, or as a Force Ghost in one of the up-and-coming Star Wars films, or the Ahsoka show. But I just don't see where you go with a season 2. If you go bigger, you risk overdoing Obi-Wan's Tatooine era even more, and making his isolation even less impactful to the character. If you go smaller, I'm not sure audiences would really be satisfied. I love the John Jackson Miller book, but if that was to be put out as a TV show, people would be like, what the hell is this boring shit? I think that the brass at Lucasfilm must recognize this, because despite Ewan McGregor basically begging for another season, it's yet to come out. And hell, if they make a story they deem worth telling, my hypocritical ass will be the first in line to see Obi-Wan light up his lightsaber for another go around. But as it stands, I'm fine if we finally let old Ben rest in his little hut on Tatooine and get some new ideas within the Star Wars universe that is a little less derivative.